right. Welcome to another episode of Author Spotlight. I'm your host, Rob YB Youngblood, President of Sales for Self-Published in 30 Days. And I'm also your LinkedIn locksmith. I'm here today with Becky Walsh, who is across the pond from us. And we're excited about being able to feature her as an author. If we give her an opportunity to share a little bit about her background, her story, and how she got to where she is today. So good to have you on our show. Becky, how you doing today?
Brilliant, and thank you very much. As you can see from my face, we've got bright sunshine in England. We're all in shock. I think we'll live, but yeah, it's really nice and warm. Weather's great. Having a lovely day. It's brilliant.
That is awesome. I love the accent, and eventually I'll be able to come over and get some. Is it? Correct me if I'm wrong. Is it fish and chips?
It's fish and chips.
If
you need a heart condition, it is our local. I'd call it a delicacy, but it's really. I mean, it's really all about the salt. Really, it's if you lather it in salt, then it's really, really tasty.
Well, I gotta stay away based on what we talked about before we jumped on this joint. I'm gonna need something with a little less salt, but that's awesome. So Becky, you're an author. Talk to us a little bit about who you are and just your background real quick.
Yeah, sure. So I'm kind of like a strange author, really, in some regards, which most people have a brilliant book idea and then they decide to write a book. And for me, I had an audience because I had a radio show. And so I decided, great opportunity. I've always wanted to write a book. Right. But for me, I was in the special needs groups at school. So I was on the dyslexic spectrum. And I think most geniuses are, may I just say. And and so I kind of started reaching out to a couple of publishers and got a book contract fairly quickly, and then interestingly lost a major publisher due to the fact that I didn't have the radio show anymore and I didn't have a big enough social media audience. But I've had 3 different publishers and also decided to self-publish a book as well. Okay. So I think the writing journey is a fascinating one, and for anyone who wants to be an author, I'd say start by writing the book you need to read. So I always started with the title of a book that I couldn't find on the bookshelves, something I wanted to read. And if I couldn't find it on the bookshelves, if I couldn't find something, and you might think, oh, well, there's millions of books. But maybe, and as it was with my first book, there was millions of books on beginner's guide, 10 steps to, and what I wanted was advanced. I wanted, what's the book that you read when you've got it and you're brilliant at it? How do you get to the next level? Right. And if you look at the publishing industry, there's not many of those books. Most books are aimed at beginners. So I write books for advanced. And so, I wanted to know about advanced intuition. And that's why I started writing the books that I did.
I love it.
Yeah, so it kind of means that you have to do a lot more research, a lot more soul searching. But most people write books that are, everybody else's book condensed into their own words. Right. And therefore you're reading books that have already been, and sometimes that helps because you learn a lot from reading somebody else's take on something. So what you might not get reading one book, you get it and apply it to life on the next time you read a different book. Same words said differently, same point said in a better way. Whereas I tend to take it to another level and I say the things that people aren't talking, not so much the joiner of dots, but the creator of new ideas.
I love it. I love it. So you mentioned something about intuition, and my understanding is that the majority of your books that you've written, the theme of them has a lot to do with intuition. Tell me more about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I wrote one on intuitive lovers. It's called Intuitive Lovers because let's face it, nobody wants to tell that they're a terrible lover.
Right.
So using your intuition means that you'll never have to have that awkward conversation. Right. Would you mind being a little bit more to the left?
That's right.
Tricky, really tricky. But the last book I wrote was called You Do Know, Learning to Act on Intuition Instantly. And one of the things that I noticed, I'm an observer of people, a lover of culture, and I like to know what's kind of like going on politically, internationally. And there was a pattern starting to form that I noticed. And we're going back about like 8 years ago now, before the phrase fake news was even a thing. And what I started to notice was that culturally, in many different cultures, it was becoming more of a faux pas to call someone a liar than it was to be one.
That's right.
And it seemed to me that as part of our capitalistic mindset, that being a liar was perfectly reasonable because it's only business.
That's right. That's right.
It's only business.
Yeah.
So I started to think, and then it's only dating, and then it's only your mother. So I started to kind of like think that, you know, if we carry on like this, then we're going to end up with lying, manipulation, all of that stuff being normality.
Right.
And I thought, well, what's the antidote to that? And I thought, to me, I've always been highly intuitive. At the age of 7, I was at a sleepover party at my friend's place, and I walked up to my friend's mother, who was doing the washing up at the time. You know, she'd put out, you know, the French fancies and sausage rolls and other English delicacies that are from France. And I said, you know, my parents argue all the time. You know, it doesn't mean that you'll get divorced, which was something she was worrying about. Now, I got frog marched home to my mother and being told, your daughter's not playing with my daughter anymore because she's spooky. And I realised that a high level of intuition, which I actually believe is caused by having a more acute right hemisphere of the brain, and I'll talk a bit more about that.
Yeah.
But it's linked to people who are quite often dyslexic are more intuitive because they can read people more easily.
Right.
Can't read a freaking book,
Right.
but can read people. Whereas if you're autistic, you can't necessarily read people, but are brilliant with language and remembering names, numbers, dates. So that's more of a left hemisphere of the brain skill.
Right. Right.
So with all of this, I decided, wouldn't the world be different if we could spot a liar, if we could stop when someone was selling it as something?
Right.
And I started to predict the future and think, well, I think we're going to come to a point where lies are normal. And then now we're in this time of fake news.
Yeah.
We don't know what to believe. At this time of COVID, there's almost all of that going on.
Yeah.
And so I wrote a book to help empower people for this time. So I didn't really write the book for the time I was writing it.
Right. Right.
5 years ahead, which I knew when I was writing the end of the book. It was a futuristic book for 5 years ahead, which of course now is 3 years.
Which is now, right? Absolutely.
Yeah,
which I think is powerful. And one thing about intuition, I always think about my grandmother. She always used to say, always trust your gut. You know, trust your gut. You know, a lot of people say my gut, like with my intestines. No. Trust that intuition. You know that there's something that's going on. It's kind of like you think about Marvel and Spider-Man, right? So you think about Spidey senses, right? So if my Spidey senses are going off, it's tingling, right? You know, since something doesn't add up. It doesn't feel right. So I love the fact that, number one, you're touching on that topic, but number two, you wrote something years ago that's applicable today. And so when it comes to writing, let's talk about that real quick. So when you wrote your first book, what was the biggest hurdle or challenge that you had to overcome as an author?
Imposter syndrome. Completely.
Let's go deep with that. Okay, imposter syndrome. Okay, go ahead.
Really, that it was. I've been in the special needs group at school. The fact that I came out of school with very few exams, and my English teacher really pushed me and was like, you know, you've got a really great mind. You know, I think you may be dyslexic, but at the time, the council didn't believe in dyslexia. So I think that what happened was this idea of, you know, I went for the publisher. I did all of that, and then when the publisher said yes, I was like, oh, okay.
Right.
What I did was I created what's known as an archetype. So me, as Becky Walsh, I can't write a book.
Right.
But the archetype of an author can. So we know our archetypes, like our inner critic, our frightened child, our inner pleaser, our control freak. So I went, well, let's just make one of those and that they're an author. And at the time I didn't wear glasses. So I got glasses with clear frames because my author archetype wears glasses, and she would wear a little jacket. So I put the glasses on and the jacket to sit down to write. And so I created a character that could write books.
Wow.
And so the next problem was when the book arrived, and it came in a brown, what we call a jiffy bag. And I didn't expect it. At the time, with being a radio show, I was quite often sent people's books to endorse, review, or interview the author. Right. So I kind of like handed down, ripped it open, went, that's my book. I tell you, I've never had a cleaner house. I cleaned the place from top to bottom. But the first thing I did was I opened the pages, and I love the smell of a new book.
Yes.
Smelling your own book.
Yes.
It's kind of a sweeter smell tinged with your own deodorant lacking.
My.
Oh, there's nothing better. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
I
that was
love that.
got
No,
over it.
no, I love that. So you're speaking to a lot of folks, man. We've got a lot of people that are watching and listening to the podcast now, and they, they deal with that. And so for you to be able to relate and then overcome it by creating an alter ego, so to speak, right? To be able to leverage that to push past the challenges that you have. I think that's amazing. And I love the description, right? You get that book, and you open it up, you smell it, it's fresh, it's pristine, straight off the press, hot off the press, as we say in the US, right? And so I think that's amazing. So let's talk a little bit about, right, so you did your first book, you got that out. What were some of the ways that you were able to get it into the hands of the people that you wanted to read the book? Like, it's because, there's different components, right? So it comes from your mind onto the page, you type it up or you write it up, then you get the book published, and now we've got to distribute the book. Did you face any challenges when it came to distribution, or was it like, hey, the moment I got it out, people were flocking to me? Let's talk a little bit about that.
There is a perception that your publisher is going to market the book for you. They don't. Even a huge publisher. So my last book was out with Hay House, and they did an awful lot, a hell of a lot, to support the promotion of the book. But at the end of the day, it has to be the author that does it. So it was turning up to bookshops, doing book signings, make sure that all of the major bookshops that you're as many book signings in bookshops that you can do. So I did like 4 different book launches in all of the competing bookshops, and then it's creating a press release, and you need to be really clear on what a press release looks like,
right?
And so work with someone on how to create a press release. So create your press release, and then I did my own PR myself. Now this takes some time, so it's basically standing in a newsagent's with all the magazines, and on the second page of every magazine will be an email address of the editor or someone like that. You just screenshot it on your phone, because otherwise you're going to be taking loads of these magazines home. So every magazine that I knew of that I wanted to read, screenshotting all of these, like take a photo, get this email address and the cover of the magazine, and then write to each person and make it personal. Really love this particular issue of this magazine, didn't read it. I really think that my information that I contain in my book, and I think that the number one thing is nobody cares about promoting your book if you're not paying them. They don't care.
Come on, say it again. Say it one more time for the people in the back.
Nobody cares about promoting your book unless you're paying them. They don't want to do it. So don't write telling them about your book. Nobody's interested. Write telling them what you're going to give the reader. So you really want to think you are creating content. So if you're going on a radio show, you're creating content for the listener. So you go on there saying what it is that you're going to learn. So if you're a fiction writer, absolutely go on there and talk about your story as a writer. If you're non-fiction, then you want to have tips that people can use at home. Right. So every producer of a radio show, of a television show, or an editor of a magazine, they have one job: create content. If you can create it for them, they have an easier job.
I love it.
The press release needs to be created in such a way that they can cut and paste it and it's an article, because they don't want to write it themselves. They're very, very busy people. So what I would say is think about it from a consumer perspective, that you're using radio, TV, and any kind of media as a vehicle for you giving them content. You're making their job easier. And the more easy you make their job, and I know this myself because having been a BBC journalist, you get one press release where you're like, I can cut and paste that, get the person on, done. Right. Or they've written it in the first person, so now I have to edit I to they. Right. I can't be bothered. I haven't got time for that. Right. So that person's now got a spot on a radio show and that person hasn't. And it's that decision is as easy as that. Right. Because people just are working really, really quickly when it comes to their media content.
I love it. You dropping some serious nuggets, man. People pay for this stuff, man. You giving the jewels away. You know what I'm saying? And matter of fact, I really want to take this time, now that I said that, how can, and we'll probably say it again at the end, but how can people find you? Because you are dropping so much valuable information that, there's some people out there who could benefit from your wisdom and knowledge, because I understand you're a coach as well, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. And I've actually created an online course called Get Clear on Your Book Idea for people who are just like got loads and loads of different ideas, especially people in business who want a book as what I would call a calling card for showing that you're amazing.
Yeah.
So if you go to beckywalsh.com, then I've got lots of blog posts on my YouTube channel as well that is telling people how to do a lot of this stuff, because so definitely have a look at the course and have a look at beckywalsh.com, because I think it's really tough, the marketing angle of getting your book out there, because once you've been in your tiny dark hole writing your book, you don't realize that you've now got to go out like jazz hands, having kind of like been reclusive, and it's a real switch over. And usually if you're anything like me, when I've written a book, I'm done with it. It's like an intense love affair,
right.
And then you're like, I'm so over you, and then you've got to talk about that person, talk about that love affair forever. It's like dating. It's like if you married Elvis, it must be a nightmare. You spend the rest of your life talking about Elvis after you've been married 3 or 4 times.
Right, absolutely.
Absolutely. Talking about that book, so you've got to keep it fresh. You've got to keep it in your mind. You've got to reignite your love with your book, even if it was the first book you ever wrote. You've got to stay in love.
Oh, I love that. And so it's got to be something that you're enthusiastic about. And that's one of the things that we talk about, self-publish in 30 days is we have this B² method. And what we do is we let our authors know that your book is your business. Right. And so even as you're putting the book together, you don't want to wait until it's done to begin promoting it. You want to start promoting it as soon as you have your book cover and your concept. You want to get it out there, and also having some type of a landing page. So let's talk a little bit about the type of audience or the avatar, like who is gravitating to Becky Walsh. Like, what I'm saying? So for example, we've got some folks that are listening, they're following us, but who gravitates to you? Like, who is a good fit or a good target or a good avatar for you, Becky?
Well, what I would say is get those people involved in the process of your book. So I know that this might sound a little bit funny, but people, if they feel that they have actually participated in the writing of your book, so ask people, here's a choice of covers. What cover should I go for? Here's a choice of titles. What title should I use? Has anyone got any case studies on this? Would anyone like to be interviewed? Because actually, people will market your book for you because they go, I helped choose that cover.
Absolutely.
I helped get, so people want to be involved, so involve them all the way along. So the predominance of people who buy books are women, especially the self-development books.
Right.
Which makes it kind of easy if you're a woman, but women buy books written by men. Because we have an unconscious bias in favor of male authors. This is particularly prevalent in the UK, probably less so in the US and other countries.
Right.
And I wish to God I had just put B Walsh instead of Becky Walsh. I wish to God I had done that, because I think I would have had more book sales, if I'm honest. So I would say the predominance of the people who follow me, a growing male audience. Because I think that men are really talking about intuition, like you just described about, that your grandmother said, go with your gut. It's usually a woman that tells you that, because we're more the right hemisphere of the brain than the left, we're more passive stillness and being than the doing, fixing, sorting and achieving. Although I know very dynamic women. I think that really for the audience that are into me, people who don't just want to hear it's woo-woo, because my book is full of science. So when we were talking before about the gut, there is actually a brain in your gut, and there's a brain in the heart.
That is true.
And my audience are smart women who read Psychology's magazine. They're the women who want to know how it works, not just, just manifest it. Well, how does manifestation work? I want the nuts and bolts. I am just not willing to have the kind of like, oh, it's mysterious. My research goes right into the depths of neuroscience, how we tick, and psychology. So my readers tend to be really smart people who have got a leaning towards spirituality, but really want the functionality of spirituality rather than kind of like, oh, I'll just meditate and light some incense sticks and They're like, but what's that doing to the brain? But why is that working? But what's, neuroplasticity? That tends to be my audience. And I think that's why I attract a lot of male readers as well, because they don't want to just have fluff. They want real, concise, purposeful content. And that's what we provide in my books.
No, I love it. And that's very descriptive, right? So there's people out there, like the moment I heard you talking about that avatar, I thought about universities across the nation, right? So you're thinking about people that went to like Harvard, Yale, Princeton, right? Morehouse, Spelman. There's folks that are truly, truly, truly intellectual, but they also have a sense of the spiritual, right? So there's some people that are truly intellectual that are like, listen, I don't believe in all that woo-woo. But then there's a lot of folks that are really spiritual that are not into the intellectual. So it's the people that have that common blend. That's who you're targeting, correct? No, that's who's attracted to you. Is that correct?
Completely. The mix between the science and the spiritual. So it's the understanding, as we talk more about mental health, especially during this time of COVID,
right.
That people are actually starting to see the science of meditation and the science of kind of, what's going on in the gut, especially when we're looking at the gut in relationship to autoimmune disorders.
Right.
So why do we have this and why are we not listening? So an exercise that I do is I get people to kind of like take, just like a bottle of something. I'm just looking, I have no water here, but kind of like a bottle, whatever, and a hand lotion, and put like a bottle of water over their heart and stand up straight. You'll tip towards the water. If you like a can of Coke, you will move away from the can of Coke. But if you were to kind of like put, say, I don't know, Coke or washing up liquid or hand lotion in a bottle and water in another bottle, but they were the same bottle, so you mixed them up or put them in envelopes and didn't know which was which,
right,
the body would tell you what was in the
wow.
So this isn't just a case of kind of going, oh, how can I trust my intuition? You could stand in the supermarket. I mean, obviously don't choose the freezer department, because that might be a little awkward.
For both men and women.
Both men and women. That's not what you want to do. But in a safer department, pick up a chocolate bar, put it on your chest, and see if you move forwards or backwards. Pick up a bag of nuts, not salted.
Right.
See if you move forward or backwards, because your body can tell you what it wants to eat.
Right.
That we can't stand there with a pizza, kind of going, but I'm gonna have the carbs anyway. I'm just gonna.
Oh, listen, I look at a carb and I start gaining weight, so I got to be careful of that. So all right, so what I want to do is we do a lightning round where I ask like 2 or 3 good questions to kind of really off the top to kind of see where you are. So you're an author, obviously you've written books, but who is your favorite author, and what's the favorite book that they have written?
So my fiction favourite author is Anne Rice. The most favourite book is Tale of the Body Thief, which is part of her vampire series. She taught me to read, really. I got into her books and she made me read. At the moment, I'm really liking Brené Brown. So for my for fiction, non-fiction, Brené Brown's writing is just so great. Like her vulnerability, her stories are just brilliant. There we go. They're my two. That's
awesome. Now, I'm sure that, that what I've heard is that when you're an author and you write multiple books, that writing more books is like an addiction, right? It's like, you start writing, you got more books in you. So say, for example, you're writing your next book. Where in the world would you want to write your next book? If you had to choose any place in the world, any city or any country in the world, where would you want to write your next book?
So I actually moved to San Francisco to write You Do Know from the UK, and moved over there and lived there for 2 years. So I've already done the big move. But I have to say, I would definitely do it on a glass bottom hut over water. So somewhere in the Caribbean, glass bottom hut over water in the Caribbean, eating papaya. Yeah, just saying, that's where I'd be.
I can literally see that. You know how on Instagram you have people that are sending, like they post these different videos. I can literally see that. That is awesome. That is awesome.
Depending one hand, fire in the other.
So we're gonna wrap up. But is there any final nugget that you would want to share with our listeners, our viewers, that that we hadn't touched on, that you think could really make a significant impact on their life?
I just really think if you really want to write a book, the difficulty is that you will start to go, why am I the person to write this book? Oh, there's millions of books out there that have the same idea. What's the thing? That fake it until you make it, like go with that full out. Get yourself a costume, put yourself in character of an author, and project yourself into the moment when someone writes you a thank you letter for writing the book. Because when that thank you letter comes, and I've had a number of them, and they make you cry every single time, it never gets any better.
Yeah.
But take yourself to that moment when somebody just goes, my God, I love this book, it's really changed my life. And screw the fact that this book might have been written by a million people before, or that there's millions of books out there. You're writing to that one person whose life you're going to change. And that is going to be worth every second that you sit in front of the computer writing that book.
I love it. I love it. I love it. Listen, you've been listening to Becky Walsh. Becky, real quick, let the listeners and the readers know, or the viewers know, where they can find you, so that they can not only support your mission and your ministry, but they can consume your content.
Brilliant. If you go to beckywalsh.com, that will link you to all of the different places that I am. It will link you to my Instagram, my YouTube, my Facebook, and brand new on Clubhouse. So I do a lot of these advice rooms on Clubhouse as well. So it would be great to help find me on there.
That is awesome. Well, this has been an awesome experience. Another episode of Author Spotlight with Becky Walsh over in the UK. I'm your host, Rob YB Youngblood, President of Sales for Self-Published in 30 Days, and your LinkedIn locksmith. Remember, be encouraged, be blessed, but most of all, continue to share the faith by walking in your gift. We'll talk soon. See you next.
Thank you.